Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the X-Files Season 3 Episode 4. It's called Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. So spoilers for the episode. It's been a little while since the last one. Christmas and Squid Game Season 2 kind of get in the way a little bit. But I'm excited to be finally back with X-Files, and it just so happens that the episode I came back to after a bit of a break is excellent, like really like surprisingly excellent, and not that I had any reason to doubt that it would be good, but I think at the start of the episode I wasn't really sure what I was feeling about the introduction and kind of the kookiness of some stuff, but then it caught me off guard and made me laugh, and then the episode kept making me laugh, which is actually maybe the most surprising thing about it, is that not only is it a little bit poignant by the end, but it's exceptionally funny. It's probably the funniest episode of the X-Files, and it's 100% intentionally funny as well, right? Because every so often there'll be like a funny thing because something's stupid, or there's a hokey effect, or there's a hokey villain or something, and it'll be funny in ways that it's not actually intentional. It has done a couple of intentional comedy things here or there. There was at least that one episode in season 2 that was very comedy focused. But Peter Boyle's in this, who of course is a really good comic actor. And he plays a psychic. There's a lot of psychics because there's a serial killer going around murdering various kinds of psychic, whether it's tea leaf readers, tarot card readers, so on, crystal balls, all that stuff. And he ends up being like potentially a new victim, which is why Mulder and Scully end up going to him because he finds one of the corpses, but then very quickly Mulder susses out that he might have psychic abilities, and then wants his help in the case. And even getting to that is really entertaining because the whole setup for that to make that kind of compelling is that we've already had someone who's very likely a fake psychic, almost certainly a fake psychic. The episode does a really good job early on after introducing the guest star Peter Boyle as Clyde Bruckman as the titular character for this, and the killer who kills the fortune teller. The crime scene of one of the murders, the police are there, and they do such a good job in the writing of setting up that we're expecting Mulder, because like, hey, this guy that's coming in to help us with this case, I've heard he's a bit, unorthodox, right? And then someone else says, hey, I worked one of the cases with him. It was a little bit spooky. That word specifically because spooky Mulder, right? That's something they've done since the start of the show. And Mulder gets this insanely cinematic entrance where he comes to the door. It's a low-angle shot looking up at him. The lighting's very dramatic. And they even wait like an extra couple of beats before Scully walks behind him. Like, he gets this like hero shot in the door. And then the police guy's like, oh, yeah, I forgot the FBI were sending someone. And Mulder and Scully come in and do a bit of talking about the case, talk about a profile. And then we see who they were actually talking about, and it's this kooky TV psychic guy who comes in. He's got an accent, he's overacting, he's chewing the scenery, and he starts like going, I sense someone, maybe with a beard, but maybe not. That's pretty broad. That's encompassing either facial hair or not. It doesn't even narrow it down to he does have facial hair or he doesn't. It's either facial hair or not, which technically is every man on the planet, the way you phrased that, right? That does not help with anything. And what's so good about this is that the overacting, at first I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but there's a very key moment where he just stops doing his psychic shit, and all the cops are eating it up. They're like, oh, this is good stuff, we're writing this down. And he's like, wait a minute, I've lost the vision. I've lost it. There's negative energy in the room. And I swear the shot of him going up and getting right in Scully's face and looking at her, and then he sort of turns with his eyebrow up and looks over at Mulder, and it ends up being Mulder who's giving off the negative energy. This acting, this little moment of overacting was so funny, and I started laughing, and it's where it kind of tipped from, like, I genuinely thought for the first half of the scene that I was maybe going to hate the episode because it was just so over the top. But the second that he went over to actually interact with Mulder and Scully, I'm like, oh, no, they know exactly what they're doing. Especially since he immediately says, Mulder needs to leave, he's giving me off negative energy. And then when he's leaving the crime scene and Mulder's waiting outside, he walks out, looks at Mulder and says, you skeptics make me sick, which is the most hilariously incorrect thing anyone has ever said to Mulder. He is nothing if not the biggest believer in all sorts of weird shit. All of this was really funny. It kind of like tipped from being like, oh, what are they doing here, into, oh no, they know exactly what they're doing here. They were setting this up. All those little payoffs are funny. But then the important story payoff to it all is that when they eventually interact with Clyde, and he just kind of offhand mentions some details that he's not supposed to know, and you know, he rightfully is worried that they might consider him a suspect because he knows certain things about the murder victim that he's not supposed to, and so on. But Mulder jumps to, no, I think you've got psychic abilities. Why don't you come to the same crime scene we were just in with this other cook, and you go around? And he says a couple of similar things, but then he also says some really specific things, like exactly where a body's going to be found, like an exact body of water, which ends up being correct. Although Mulder and Scully debate his description of something nearby the water. He calls it a short, fat Nazi stormtrooper, I think, and there's like a sort of white sphere thing with a sign on it, which that's what he was referring to. So Scully's the skeptic. And I think what's so good about this is that Scully, inherently, I might get a little bit annoyed sometimes now, where she's still too much of a skeptic with the main alien stuff, because at this point, how could she not believe there's more going on there? But this is different. This is separate. This is its own thing. This is just, do you believe this man is a psychic? Not even do you believe in psychics in general. Do you believe this man is a psychic? And she's allowed to be skeptical about that. Because he's being vague in some ways, and he does not get everything. One of the jokes of the episode is that he keeps buying lottery tickets and never wins, because that's just not something he sees. He doesn't get the numbers. It kind of becomes clear that all he really ever sees is how someone is going to die, or something related to someone's death. He never just sees random things. And probably my favorite running gag, and Peter Boyle was cracking me up throughout this entire episode, is there's a few times where he does get really specific information. He'll give someone's name, address, and a bunch of financial information, and they'll be like, wait, you just got that from that little I think it was a keychain he was holding at that moment? And he goes, no, don't be silly, I sold him insurance last month. And honestly, those little payoffs, and I started to expect them as the episode went on, where there was moments where he was saying stuff and I'm like, oh, there's a punchline to this. There's going to be a moment here where he finally says, yeah, I'm in. One of the other ones actually is when they're trying to convince him to keep helping with the case, and he doesn't really want to. And he starts talking about how he's worried that he's going to affect the future. It's actually quite interesting. This is a bigger conversation I'll have in a second, but he starts talking about affecting the future negatively, and suggests that, hey, what if I help you stop the killer from killing his next victim, but his next victim was supposed to die. And that woman then lives and then goes on to have a child who is the man who invents time travel, and then goes back in time and starts a chain of events where, you know, no one ever comes to this continent. The US never exists, and he starts doing all these big things. Which is interesting in and of itself, that he's thinking about it in that way when we're not even, he's just theorizing the possibility that there might be time travel that will then affect the past and the future. But he's kind of treating the future like it's already something that's supposed to happen. He's already acting like Doc Brown in Back to the Future 2, where he's saying, no, we can't affect our own future, you have to shut up. He's still thinking that way. But then he kind of has this moment where he pauses and goes, or it could just be something smaller than that. Maybe my mother and father will never meet and I'll never be born. And then there's a pause and he says, I'm in. And that was funny. It was such a funny payoff to that little thought train that he had, where he realized he might erase himself from existence. And that actually sounds quite nice, because constantly seeing how people are going to die, or the stuff about their death and dead bodies, is traumatizing. He hates it. He hates living with this. He hates seeing corpses. He hates seeing, because early on, he visits his neighbor who's an old lady, and he basically gets a vision of her dog eating her. And it's maybe not necessarily 100% clear that's what it is the first. You sort of it becomes clear at the end exactly what that was, because it comes up. But it's just little things like that, and he hates it. He doesn't like it. At one point, he talks to Mulder and Scully about how he sees dead bodies all the time, and Scully says, yeah, we get used to it, and he's like, no, you shouldn't get used to it. I still hate it. So I really liked his demeanor. I liked his attitude towards everything. I liked that he was never really that concerned with proving to Mulder and Scully what he could do. Mulder obviously believes it to a certain point and wants to use it, And certainly once they realize the killer knows about him and the killer's killing people like him, it becomes about protecting him and hiding him in a hotel. But I think his chemistry with the two of them was really good. Him making little jokes about like Scully being a skeptic, or there's one great little gag he has actually when they're in the car and they're going to find another dead body, which they do eventually end up finding. And out of nowhere, Clyde just says, "Oh, I can't think of any other, sad way to go or undignified way to go than autoerotic asphyxiation." And I will not make any jokes about a certain actor who might have been found that way. Okay, it's tempting. I'm tempted to bring him up. I'm not going to do it. But Clyde says this, and Mulder goes, "Wait, why are you telling me that?" And then he just goes, "Don't think about it." It was such a... And he's clearly just making fun of him. He's clearly just putting that seed in his head that maybe that's how Mulder's going to die. Although, I have a theory, based on the events of the rest of the episode, that while Clyde does see people's deaths and how they're going to die, I don't think he sees anyone's death that happens after he dies. And I have that theory because at one point when Scully's babysitting him, and he's like, "Hey, you want to know, right? You're not going to ask?" And she leans in finally and says, "Okay, fine, tell me. How am I going to die?" And he smiles and says, "You don't." And because he dies by the end of the episode, I kind of took that to mean, it's not that she's immortal, right? I mean, maybe like the X-Files plot's going to go a certain way where she'll become immortal, and I'll eat my words on that. But to me, it was that was like, no, you don't die before he does, so he cannot see your death. That was my interpretation of that. But even, there's a great little moment with Scully when she's babysitting him, and they're in like the hotel, and there's like twin beds, so he's on one bed and she's in the other, and she's asking him, "Okay, what do you see?" And he says, "Oh, we're going to end up in bed together." And she kind of like slumps her head, like, "Really, you're going to use this line on me?" And he very quickly says, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I don't want to like creep you out or scare you or whatever. I'm just like, we're going to be in a bed together. We're going to be holding hands. I'm going to be crying, and I'm going to feel, comforted by you," or something like that. He says, and of course, as he's saying this, I was thinking, "Oh, this is going to come true." It's not a sexual thing. He's not like, it's obviously when you say, "I'm going to end up in bed with you," it sounds like sex, but that's not what he's actually saying. Somehow, at the time, I thought they were going to end up having to hide in a bed from the killer or something like that. That's what I was thinking in the moment. It ends up being a much more beautiful little thing at the end, which is when he's dead and they find him dead, he's taking pills to finally end his suffering. She holds his hand sitting on the edge of the bed, and there's like tears on his dead face. Like, so it ended up true, which is kind of how I was taking it in the moment, is like, oh, she's laughing this off. And she even says, "Look, there are hits and there are misses, and then there's misses." Like, she's making it very clear that under no circumstance are we ended up in bed together. And I chuckled, but I'm like, no, I think he's right. I think it's going to happen. It's just not in the context of which you have jumped to, Scully. And sure enough, it does indeed happen at the end. And there's a whole thing about like trying to find the killer. I mean, if there's any critiques really about the episode, is that the killer himself is just kind of a plot device, and he's not that interesting. They do a cool little thing though, where when they introduce him at the start, he bumps into Peter Boyle's character Clyde, and they do this awkward thing where they can't, that awkward thing where you step in front of someone and you're both trying to let each other through, but you both step to the same side, but you do it a couple of times, so it's really awkward. They sort of like tease that he's there by having like the bellhop of the hotel do that with Scully, and it's like a little sign before you see his face that it's him. And it just turns out to be fate that he's not found him, he's not infiltrated the hotel to try and get to him. This is just where he works. The killer works at this hotel, and it turns out the threads that he's been leaving, which didn't seem like something that a male killer would be wearing, is the sort of thread that's also on a bellhop uniform, and that's kind of how they put it together. Now, I will critique that a little bit, because like, was he wearing his bellhop uniform for all of these murders? Because they found these threads like 3 of the crime scenes. It felt like every time we actually saw him with a victim, he was never wearing it. But that was also for the reveal for us. So that is a minor nitpick. But I can't really fault it too much, because the actual little moment of realization that it's him, that he's there, is a good one. And you know, again, to go back to like the bigger thing that Clyde brings up, which I do think is very interesting, is that Clyde thoroughly believes that there's nothing they can do to change anything. And Mulder tries to argue that no, if someone's going to get hurt, I have to do everything in my power to stop it. And I think that core theme is really strong, even though it is a very lighthearted and funny at times episode for a lot of it. Just in this idea that he's just given in to, like, no matter what, things are going to happen the way that I see them, right? They're inevitable and I can't help anyone. I'm powerless. So even though he has this superpower effectively to see death, he actually feels powerless because he thinks he can't do anything about them. And Mulder tries to tell him that you can. And what's beautiful about it is, well, he never gets to know this, right? He takes his life before he finds out. But he tells Mulder of a vision of, like, Mulder trying to chase the killer, and it's in a kitchen, which ends up happening at the hotel, and he's looking for the killer, and he steps in a pie that's on the floor, and the vision ends with the killer sneaking up behind Mulder and slitting his throat with the knife. And we see that in the vision, although Peter Boyle kind of says, oh, the ending's fuzzy, I can't see it. And I think he's just, you know, doesn't want to tell him that. But in the actual event, when it takes place, it plays out like we kind of saw in the vision. But because Mulder had heard from Peter Boyle, oh, he's going to sneak up behind you with a knife, he kind of like reacts to it. He gets, you know, he stops it in time and is able to protect himself a little bit. And then also by happenstance, Scully gets on the wrong elevator and ends up being there to help. So this idea of fate kind of being a part of it as well is also something that kind of comes into it. So he effectively saved Mulder's life. He did stop a murder, and he might just never know that he did that, which is kind of bittersweet. But yeah, he could change something. It's kind of sad that he thought he never could. But here it is. I really think that is quite a touching element to the episode, and I think I'm always impressed when something that comes across as mostly funny is able to actually tug on the heartstrings by the end and give you something that feels like it matters. It's a fine line to walk, but effectively what they did is they made this guy very likable and funny throughout the entire episode, so that when he leaves at the end, the way he does, it does actually kind of hit. And that he just can't be burdened anymore with knowing when people are going to die and having seen that. Possibly feeling guilty that he was kind of right there as the killer kills the policeman who's guarding him at the time. You know, that's probably something that weighed on him in the moment. But yeah, I suppose there's maybe some interesting things to say about the killer and the fact that the killer believes he's just a puppet. Because he actually says to the victim at the start, like, I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing, but I'm going to do them. And when he kind of follows that up with Peter Boyle's character Clyde later in the episode, he says, hey, can you tell me why I'm doing what I'm doing? Because I don't know. Like, he's very casual about it. Clyde says to him, like, have you not figured it out yet? You're a homicidal maniac. There's nothing stepping in and making you do this. You're just psychotic. And he's like, you know, that makes a lot of sense. That explains a lot of things. Like, that did give me a chuckle. As much as I think the killer character is kind of the weakest part of the episode, it's not that much of a hindrance because it's not the important part. But that reaction did give me a nice little chuckle. But no, it's interesting. And you can also argue as well that, like, he doesn't kill Clyde because Clyde says that he's not going to yet, and it sounds like Clyde has told him that he's going to go and, like, kill Mulder in the kitchen, because when the killer gets shot by Scully, he says this is not how it's supposed to happen. It sounds like Clyde has almost kind of helped put the events into motion that he saw in the first place. And maybe you could argue that he was hoping that because he told Mulder enough, that Mulder might be able to sidestep it or something. You know, like, it's a really fun play on kind of like predestination and fate, and in a way that doesn't get overly heavy-handed with, like, you know, like, because it'd be very easy to do like a really timey-wimey episode where you're doing a bunch of stuff and showing multiple paths and all that, but that's not what this is. This is something where it's all kind of in theory. It's all about just, do you believe in it or not, which is obviously a big thing for the X-Files. And I love at the end of the episode, Scully's on her own looking after the dog of the neighbor who died, and the cheesy fake psychic comes on TV saying, "Hey, call me, and I'll tell you if you're getting that promotion or what." And he's doing all these things, and being cheesy. He's wiggling his eyebrows at the camera, and Scully picks up the phone, and you're like, "Wait, no, Scully. Like, I get that you might believe in psychics now, but not this guy. This guy's clearly a fake." And of course, the episode ends with her throwing the phone at the TV. And of course, she gets away with that because it's the 90s and this is a big chunky CRT that can withstand a nuclear blast. If you threw a phone at a modern TV, you'd damage the TV. It'd be unusable after that. But yeah, this light tap with the phone is nothing. And it's a big chunky, cordless phone as well. It's not like some little thing. Anyway, that's important. But it was a funny ending. It was like a nice little comedy beat to end on, despite the fact that it able to get to a poignant place right before the ending. So I really appreciate it. It really felt like everything came together at the end to a real satisfying conclusion that really like told this story of the character. The title of the episode is actually very perfect. Having now watched it, it feels fitting for what the story actually is. And then just to talk about Clyde a bit more, we see that, I mentioned that he's an insurance salesman, like a life insurance salesman, and we see him with a couple, like a young couple that he's trying to sell insurance to, and the guy's like, we were thinking about this, but, the thing is that I kind of want to buy a boat, and I was thinking maybe I wouldn't get life insurance. And Clyde's like, maybe in 2 years' time you'll be hit with a drunk driver and you'll need this insurance kind of thing. Now, admittedly, if that's true, that flies in the face of him seeing visions of death after his death, because I don't think he can. But because he does kind of like stop as he's talking here, as if he's seeing it, and as if it's like affecting him, and he's getting kind of like, oh, this is serious business. I'm getting traumatized because I'm witnessing this young man's death. I think I still stand by my theory that he can't, and that this is just his sales tactic. Maybe this is his imagination running away and he's kind of mixing it in with stuff that he actually sees. That's my theory, because everything else in the episode makes me think he can't see deaths beyond his own. That's my guess. Which oddly makes the fact that he kind of had a vision about his own death super kind of sweet, because technically he's dead at that point already, but you could kind of see a little bit beyond, like just a little bit beyond. That's kind of nice. That's kind of a nice little detail. Yeah, honestly, the character was a hoot. Like, he was constantly making me laugh. Every time he said something and they're like, whoa, you sensed that? And he's like, no, I knew because of this. And he just like gave some offhand, like easy reason as to why. He also explains that it started happening because he was obsessed with the idea that someone got on a plane with Buddy Holly, I think he said. Old singers that I'm definitely way before my time, so forgive me for not remembering all the names here. But he talks about how, everything in his life got up to this point where he literally had a coin flip as whether to get on that plane or not. And as a result, he died. And he thought about that, basically he was obsessed with that thought since that day. And then since somewhere along the lines, it kind of turned into him actually seeing people's deaths. Which is an interesting origin, because it kind of suggests the power of the mind in a way, where it wasn't so much that he got, like something spilled on him in a lab, or it wasn't that some divine intervention gave him this power or anything like that, or even something like traumatic happened to him where he had a near-death experience. I kind of love that he just thought about it so much that he kind of tapped into something that he didn't realize that he could tap into, that most people will never tap into. And I think that just gives it this, I don't know, like kind of subtlety to like everything about the way this psychic story's handled, at least with him. And it's open for debate if any of the other psychics that the killer goes to kill are actually psychic. I mean, maybe the fact that this one is able to talk him out of killing him maybe suggests that he's the only one that actually was psychic. But I mean, I don't know. I'd have to go back and check that first scene where the tea leader's saying what he's going to do. Was it accurate? I can't remember. But there's just something so beautiful about the way it handles the idea here, where the character isn't trying to prove anything, he doesn't want to prove anything, he hates the fact that he has these visions, and the only time he ever tries to kind of sidestep something is just when he kind of realizes that he's making himself sound guilty or something like that. Or he sees Mulder's death in that vision and decides not to say every detail because it's a bit too much. Like, I really like that. I like Mulder trying to debate with them to say, hey, if we can change something, we should. And then ultimately convincing them that maybe it's worth trying. That central theme of like breaking out of predestination is something that I always enjoy in science fiction. And it's impressive that we're able to do that here without time travel as a mechanic. I mean, it's talked about. He does bring up a time traveler, but only in theory. So I like that. And then, you know, at the end, Scully's kind of like feeling something for him and kind of realizes that there's more to him than our original skepticism. So I kind of feel like both main characters got good moments and good story beats with them. And then his central story was somewhat touching. And he was also got to be a funny, grumpy old man, which is also what Peter Boyle's best at. So, honestly, yeah, this was a winner. And I remember the last episode I did before the break was that stupid one about the arcade player with Giovanni Ribisi. What a step up this one was. Damn. So what a treat to come back to this episode. So yes, thank you very much for joining me, everyone. You can expect regular X-Files and Person of Interest going forward. The aim is to have one of each every week. If I do have to slow down at all at any point, they'll just alternate if I have to, if things are a bit hectic. But you should never go more than 2 weeks without an X-Files for the foreseeable future. So thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you can comment below and let me know what you thought of the episode. It always helps out. Plus, if you can always be a YouTube member as well if you don't want to do Patreon for some reason. But Patreon gets you a lot more bonuses, especially for the movie content and all the movie podcasts over on MailFuzz Movies. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?